Hi, it's your boy Alex. Today we're gonna go over rapid spinners in black and white draft, and as I mentioned in my hazards video, I'm gonna go over them more in depth. And today's aim is gonna be going over the overall spin, and then going over the noteworthy rapid spinners on their own, and telling why they are good, where they fit, what makes them good, etc. So yeah, general overview is that rapid spinner is the only way to remove the hazards on your own side of the field. Obviously, you can prevent them via like using taunt, magic bounces off the hazards, magic coat does the same thing but as a move. But rapid spin is the only way you can remove the hazards in your own side of the field. And best rapid spinners either have very good defensive profiles and thus are able to rapid spin often during the game, or have very good offensive profiles where they force a lot of switches and thus are able to spin. So this applies to the coming examples. I have brought examples about these ones. And often these rapid spin users are key components of black and white drafts, and they are usually drafted. The two first ones are gonna be drafted usually around round 1 or round 2, and then the next year up below them are gonna go around round 3, round 4, etc. So yeah, Starmie, yay my beloved. This is the best rapid spinner in black and white draft, bar none. And this is because it is very good. It has a very good offensive profile with a blistering speed of 115. And this is, for example, extremely critical in outspinning Terrakion. And it is like not bad at all defensively either. So it can gain entry on some fighters, some psychics, fires. No, for these you can fairly easily come in on an Infernape if you aren't that scared of U-turn. And then you can come in on some grounds with Air Balloon. Air Balloon is a very common item on this mon, because you are spikes immune for the first turn. You haven't taken damage yet, so you don't take as much damage on the entry. And Starmie is very interesting in many ways because it is still like a defensive mon, but at the same time it's far better offensively. So for example, bulky waters have a hard time taking down because you can just recover on them, and you can scald them, all that garbage, or thunderbolt them, not to speak of that. And you're very hard to slow down because you have natural cure, so even if you get like parried, you can just shrug that off. And Starmie is exceptional into some of the stealth rockers in this format. It deals fairly well into Skarmory. It deals very well into grounds. For example, Landers, it just fucks that completely over, unless it's choice card. You can beat Garchomp with it. You can beat Cobalion with this. Metagross you kind of struggle into because that has Pursuit, but then Bronzong doesn't really touch you, for example. So you just have these. You have very good matchups into many of the common hazarding mons, so that is a huge benefit for it, for its favor. And it likes good pivoting a lot because it's like this offensive behemoth and then you kind of do want it to gain it, to not take that much damage on entry, because for example, if you try to come in on a Cobalion to rapid spin, you can just get close combat on the switch, and while it doesn't do like that much damage, it still hurts. So you really would want to avoid that, and pivot with a slower U-turn one, and then going for the rapid spin after that. And Starmie is commonly one of the first picks. It is usually the sixth in black and white. 7th is not unheard of. Round 2 for Starmie now is completely unheard of. That is it used to be like that, where you could delay it until round 2, picking like Dragonite middle of round 1. But nowadays, it is so common to see this drafted early on, because how much it is valued to check like Terrakion, for example. So this is an insanely good mon overall. Excadrill. It's just a very powerful breaker, and it does have the issue where it doesn't want to really use Rapid Spin at times, because, for example, it has this Swords Dance set, and if you try to fit Rapid Spin into that set, you will not either have Rock Slide, because you need the both stabs most often. So you're usually missing out on Rock Slide, and that is not a really high-end trait you would want to have, because then you don't threaten out like Zapdos, for example, that well, or you don't threaten out Skarmory with your SD set, so you can struggle at times. And that is a thing Excadrill has, is that it isn't as good as Starmie is into the best hazarding mons. Like, example, Skarmory just beats it. Pharaoh, it does fairly okay-ish into. Landers beats Excadrill quite easily. Metagross beats it. Or Metagross, it can like beat it with Shuka, but then it's also a mixed matchup, because you can just beat Metagross on your own. Cobalion, you're not coming into safely because close combat deals a billion. What else? You can come in fairly easily on Uxie, for example. That is a good thing you have, because you just threaten that out with Stab Mold Breaker, Stab Earthquake with Mold Breaker. And Excadrill is commonly the primary spinner in a team, but it massively benefits from not being like the only spinner in the team, because it has the coverage issues, as I mentioned, and it is so very good on like offensively, and it is very good as a Choice Scarfer, for example, and the Choice Scarf variants obviously can't spin as easily, so it doesn't always want to slot that in. It is also fairly bulky, funnily enough, with Leftover Wars, for example. It has a very good HP stat, which I can't for the life of me remember right now, but it has a very good HP stat, and being Steel type, it can like check stuff if you IV it properly, and it does do force a lot of switches, and it pretty much beats all the major spin blockers. For example, you beat Cofagrigus with this, with Sub Earthquake, and then you can beat like Gengar, you can beat fairly easily with Choice Scarfed Earthquakes. You can beat Dusclops is probably the only major one, because Dusclops is so fucking bulky where you cannot reasonably take it down. But Jellicent you take fairly easily on. Even if it's like a threatening Scald, you can still fire back pretty hard with Earthquake, so it's not coming into your rapid spin efforts fairly easily. Obviously, Jellicent can beat you, however, if you're trying to stay in on a Jellicent, without Chep, it's like completely moronic, but you can still do it. That is not. You can still beat a Jellicent with the Excadrill. So that's the benefit Excadrill has for example, a Starmie, which doesn't hit as hard and thus isn't that easily able to win that 1v1 matchup. Then we have Tentacruel. Tentacruel. It is a very fucking weird mon. So it has fairly good bulk. 120 special defense is no slouch, and the defensive typing is a mixed bag. I have listed it as good, but it does have limits. So, being a grounded poison means that you're fighting resist, but you're not a very good fighting resist. So you don't gain as much on the defensive side from that. But then you love the fact that you are a grounded poison for the fact that you stay off toxic spikes. So even if you don't get the spin that turn, you still remove that component of hazards. And that can be extremely vital at times. And being a toxic spiker in itself too, it's like a massive benefit for Tentacruel, even as a rapid spinner. And it can check Hydreigon, it can check Gengar, it can check Gengar, and it is very good against opposing water types. I have listed Hydreigon and Infernape and Gengar, but especially Hydreigon and Infernape, those you have to be very careful around, because Infernape, for example, can just kill you with an Earthquake, but you can just slot in Sugar Berry and Hydro that bitch, and then that dies. So you can check it with good item usage. Hydreigon is a similar story, but unless you like Giga Invest, you're not taking the Dracos that well, so you just have to be accounting for example, you don't take on Specs Hydreigon, but you can take on Scarf Hydreigon fairly easily. So if you can, you know that you can force the Hydreigon's Choice Scarf, then then you can check it reasonably well. And you gain entry on some defensive mods, like Skarmory, for example. Suicune, you gain fairly easily entry on. Cofagrigus, you can come in on. And threaten them with Scald or Toxic. And that's a pretty big one. And the big base speed tier of 100 is very, very good. In many ways. And it does benefit a lot from Rain, but it can still work well without it. Like Rain unlocks Rain Dish, and then you become very, very hard to take down because you just healed 12% in Rain. And that's a very good component to have. But outside of Rain, you still are like fairly bulky, so you function well without it too. Sorry, I had to yawn. And then we have Blastoise. And it is the most defensive one out of the major water spinners, and it behaves very similarly to Tentacruel, but it uses its physical bulk now more, because it has a base defense stat of 100, and that is that allows it to check like Terrakion, for example. You can check Dragonite fairly easily, you can check Metagross, you can check Scizor. And the pure water typing is objectively a better defensive typing than Tentacruel has. But still you are weak to Toxic Spikes, for example, and that can be a struggle at times. But you still come in on like bulky water types fairly easily. You don't come in as easily on spin blockers, but you still can come into them. You're much more reliant on that bulk, and thus you need the leftovers much more than Tentacruel does if you're not in Rain. And having access to Roar is pretty big, because you can force that hazard damage, and now it becomes like a pretty good component in the hazard wards in themselves. So it functions in the hazard ward very well. With Rapid Spin, and it contributes a lot, because you can force like the spin blocker out, and then you make them take another round of hazard chip, and then you can, for example, Scald them on switch, and that suddenly they take even more damage. So you can actually beat your own spin blocker checks, and that is a very good trait in my opinion. And these the Starmie, Tentacruel, and Blastoise form this elite core called the Water Spinners. That is a term I came up with. The Water Spinners are like the default best of the best. They are the creme de la creme in Black and White Draft when it comes to spinners, because they just have so many nice traits with their defensive typings and their offensive pressures. Not to mention this fact that they get Scald randomly, or not so randomly in Gen 5. So that's a very good thing. Yeah. Then we have Donphan, and Donphan is a defensive stronghold. 90 HP and the 120 defense allowed it to gain entry on a ton of different physical attackers. For example, you can pretty easily come in on. Well, I was about to say guard jump, but if an outrage lock a guard jump, you're gained fairly free entry on. Like a fully physical guard jump, you can come in on fairly easily. Terrakion, you can come in fairly easily on. You just have to be careful about hidden power eyes. You can come in on like Victini, for example, which is a pretty good one because weak rate here hurts like a motherfucker otherwise. So you can come in if properly invested, for example, but you still lose to Choice Bandit Victini, so have to be careful. And it's fairly straightforward in what it does. It usually has these three moves. It has Ice Shard, it has Earthquake, it has Rapid Spin, and then you have like the last move is like for example Stealth Rocks or Rock type move or Toxic. It can be Toxic, for example. So it's fairly honest, and when you draft it, you know what you're getting, and that's a good part. And being Rock's new resistant is very good, in my opinion, and that's like a major component on what makes it better. And you have sometimes issues keeping hazards off. That's a fairly big problem at times. Because into like Thunderous matchups, where there is a Starmie, for example, they can just force you out so easily, and then you don't get the spin, and you're kind of susceptible to some of the spin blockers, like Acro of Krigus is a pretty big one because you just burn it. You get burned, and being burned is massive boon for you as a Donphan user, because you need that leftovers to stay healthy and check those targets that you need to check with its EVs. So you just have to take into account that this Donphan also has a role in being a defensive answer to many things, and then if you combine the rapid spinning fact with it, you have to be more careful around using it. It is not a bad offensive mon though, because 120 base attack is very good, and it hits very hard. Like, it's almost as strong as Mamoswine is, and Mamoswine is noted as one of the true like absolute breakers in this format. So 120 attack stat is like no slouch offensively. And Ice Shard is a massive factor to it, because you can check like Salamence, you can check Dragonite with it if they have Dragon Danced and are outraging your team into oblivion. So that's you have these very nice traits because of that. Then, next one, Fortress, the Swiss Army knife of Black or White draft. You have access to it all. You have the hazards, you have the spin, you have the volt switch, and you have fairly good bulk with the steel typing. So this kind of has everything going for it, but then it doesn't, because it has the issue. First of all, it has more 4 move slot syndrome galore, where you kind of want everything at times. So you want like a hidden power ice to check dragons, or you want spikes at times, but then you also sometimes want stealth rocks into that set. Then you want the Trier Ball so you can hit harder with your stab attack. Then you want Toxic, for example, and then you kind of want to fit that Rapid Spin there. So you kind of don't get to, if this is your only spinner, you kind of aren't using the full potential of this mon. And it also has in-game issues with being with having very bad speed tier, and it lacks some offensive power because it's only like hard hitting stab is Charball, which it is one of the better users of it because of that low speed stab, to be fair. And you are frail on the special side. You don't have that great of a special defense stat. So your major boon is that your major benefit, however, is that 140 base defense, which allow you to, for example, this thing can take a free choice banded outrages from Kieran Black, which is fucking insane. No, that has to be incorrect. No way it does that. Let me actually check. Is that true? I think it is. Yeah, you can take free outrages from Kieran Black, and that is a massive thing. So yeah, it has that benefit, and that's a very rare trait to have. Not many mons can achieve that in black and white, and this isn't like Electric Week, for example, like Skarmory is. So you don't automatically lose to that either. So yeah, that's. It has very nice traits, yeah, but you just have to account for these weaknesses it has because it is very barely repetitive and fairly weak on some components of its arsenal. But if you like draft it with like a Slowking, for example, that fixes a ton of these problems. I have drafted it personally with a Blissey before, and that worked wonders with it because Blissey just whiz-pashed to it fairly easily, and then it kept the Fortress alive for the physical interactions, and then Blissey could take on the special interactions. So you usually just have to account for the fact that it has these weaknesses. It does have. So, and as a Rapid Spinner, you are enforcing a lot of interactions, but you still like do okay. So this is like the most average spinner into me in the metagame right now. Then we have Hitmontop. And Hitmontop overall has fairly good bulk. With 110 special defense, it has 95 base defense and Intimidate, so that's like fairly good. And it does require Foresight, but to spin effectively. But it's like also, it is a spinner that has Foresight, so that's very good. Because you can actively now spin into ghost types. Being a fighter though is like you're fairly weak compared to other fighters, and eating up that offensive slot is kind of vital at time, kind of important. So you have to account because you cannot reasonably do Terrakion plus Hitmontop. You cannot reasonably do Mienshao plus Hitmontop. You cannot do Infernape with this, and these are very strong mons overall. So that is a boon for it. It's an opportunity cost for your offense. It also has it has coverage issues. It really has like Stone Edge and Earthquake for its like coverage options. It doesn't have elemental punches, and that can be kind of bad if you're like trying to, for example, win the Hazard War with the Landorus Firion, because Landorus can just win that in the late long term, as it hits you harder than you hit it with Earthquake, than you can hit it, for example, with like Stone Edge, because that isn't stab and you don't have as great of a defense attack stat as you don't have as great of an attack stat as Landorus does. So you have it has these like clear weaknesses, but it's also 9 points, so like that is to be expected, and it can be a very good fit on many offensive teams. and different kinds of teams. And I would not draft this with like a Volcarona, for example, because it isn't that reliable on winning the Hazard War and then thus, you know, like allowing the Volcarona to not take 50% on entry on the go right away. So, but it can be like a great fit, for example, on Garchomp course if you get desperate on the spin and you don't go for the Blastoise on round 3. So that's where it like shines. It shines on the course that you know can reasonably afford to take a few rounds of Stealth Rocks and not minding like Hitmontop's weaknesses. And then we have, lastly, out of the major spinners, we have Claydol. And Claydol is very similar to Donphan, but it isn't. It is notably weaker. It is like comparing their offenses is not like it's not even close. But then instead it has a very good special bulk. It has 120 in special defense, and that is a very good trait to have because it allows you to check like fighters, for example. You are very good into Terrakion, but then you are also good into Thunderous Fury because you're so bulky on the special side. And having Levitate and being a ground type means that your only weakness to hazards is Stealth Rocks, and that is like a resistance too. So you are very good into hazards in general. You don't mind you don't mind spikes, you don't mind toxic spikes, and that is from the spinners so far we have discussed. No other mon has been able to achieve all these traits without an item. So that is a very good benefit to Claydol, and it is like I don't really have much else to say outside of like you are very good defensively, and you get to spin maybe once or twice during a game most often because your offensive profile allows you longevity in the long term, and then you can use that longevity to get those spins off in the later half of the game. And I would recommend is as when you're looking for your like if you absolutely need a rapid spin user and one of the later ones are or the earlier ones are taken already, this is a very good alternative. And then I have listed some major low tier spinners. I'm not gonna go into much depth with this, but Armaldo is very good for its price, and it's rock type that is not weak to ground and can spin, and it can be very good on example like Magic Guard Sands. Then I have Kabutops, which has a very good offensive profile, and then it forces witches to do that, and then it can spin due to that fact. Sandslash is just Donphan but worse. It quite literally it is Donphan but worse. It has a tad bit weaker stats. It doesn't have Ice Shard, but it follows much of the same principles as Donphan does. And then I have listed Torkoal, which I have listed because it can deal with many of the common Stealth Rock users like Fairthorn and Skirmer, for example, and then it beats those, and then it can thus win this Hazard War by rapid spinning against those targets. And Torkoal is also very cheap. Closing thoughts. Yep, so rapid spin is a major component of Black and White draft. Synergy between your rapid spinner and other draft is vital to understand, and your planned spinner can determine what picks you can reasonably go for. And having the option to spin is better than no spin at all. So, for example, I would also always suggest going for a rapid spinner option, even if it's like Torkoal, for example, because having the option to, you know, not getting chipped the entire game from spikes, even if it's like a one-time use, it's always better. because otherwise the opponent will just set up spikes for free, and they will be there. And even if you have like a few immunes, then you have some ones. If you, for example, have a like magic card spam sand, you have Alakazam, Reuniclus, then you can probably throw in a Claydol into that. Maybe, I don't know, Hydreigon, you can reasonably throw into that, but then your Tyranitar is taking full hazard damage every single time on entry. It just can't check the opposing Psychic types like it needs to. And about the synergy, before I'm gonna close this video, is that some mons demand a good Rapid Spinner more than others. So, for example, you can't reasonably go for Volcarona plus Armaldo, because you need that spinner to do spin oftenly, and you need to be very good at it. So if you're trying to go for like a Dragonite based cord, I would always suggest getting one of the big three. Excadrill is, for example, does wonders with the Dragonite, or you can always go for the Blastoise, etc., etc. So, but then you can go, for example, like an Armaldo or a Torkoal, because that you need this Pokemon to come every single game, and you need to get it to spin every single game. So that was a doozy. I hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully this video was in some way useful for the future, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Goodbye for now.